the greatest fisherman in all of Italy. He would go out into the wide Mediterranean Sea and he would pull back, coming back with shark, with tuna, with anchovy, with bream, with more fish than you could mention. And he seemed to love the sea. First and foremost of all things, he loved the flowing ocean. And so it was a very great surprise to everyone when he got married. And not married to just any old girl, but the brightest, liveliest, most vivacious girl in all his village. Well, everybody laughed at him and said, well, it's not right. He spent his life in the sea. They're not going to be happy. But at first, they seemed terribly, terribly happy together. Well, he gave up the ocean. He lived with her for 6 months. Only went out with his fishing rod once every so often. But you know, the sea's not like that. He started to long for it, to long for the surf. One day he went out in a boat and he fished. And he had him. He went back to the fishing boats and he would sail out for months at a time, leaving her fretting at home. Who should come by but the Duke of Sicily? And he saw her moping by the strand, looking sad. And he came up to her and dropped a diamond at her feet. She picked it up and she'd never seen anything quite so bright. And she laughed and he laughed. And so they became lovers. For weeks, months, she would dwell with the Duke in his great palace. But when her husband came back, she was sure always to be there waiting for him, making his life a delight for those brief times he was in shore. And everyone was happy. Everyone except the king's minister. For the king's minister wanted his Duke, who was unmarried, to marry the king's son in Naples. And so it was, one day he hit upon a plan. He got 7 bags of gold and wrote a letter, giving it to his most trusted messenger and telling him to wait by the harbour, on the men's side of the harbour, to make sure he gave the fisherman, when he came back, the note. And the messenger did so. And so it was, the fisherman read, "Thank you very much for your wife's service. She has been of great use, but the king doesn't need her any more." And 7 bags of gold. Well, the fisherman knew what that meant. He stormed up to his house. He was as angry as he had never been before. As angry as only a man who has lost something he never valued can be. He stormed into his house and said, "Wife, is this true?" And she said, "I can guess what you mean. I don't know who's told you, but I have been so unhappy, so lonely. It has felt to me that you're married more truly to the sea than to me." And he said, "Since you are jealous to the sea you go." And he took one of his great nets and he caught her in it and he weighed it down. And he went out in his fishing boat and he sailed out 7 leagues and dropped her overboard. And as he dropped her down, he howled with fury. But as she sank, he wept. And the weeping brought the sirens, who then dwelt off by Corsica's rocky shores. They came fast, smelling the tears of the sailor. And they saw the bag, the net, going through the ocean, and they wondered at it. And they opened it up, and they wondered all the more. "There's a beautiful woman in it," they said. "Strange, the sailor to sail away such a beauty. Well, she will live with us." And one of them got out a black knife and cut gills in her throat. And another rubbed ointment on her body. And another plaited her long golden hair. And she breathed and gasped, and bubbles came out of her mouth. And they said, "We will call you Froth, for frothy you are, and you will live with us, sister. You will be a siren of the wide Mediterranean Sea." And so it was. She went down to the great palace of the sirens, down off Corsica, and dwelt with them a while. One day, when the moon was high, they said, "Come, we sing, we sing. There is a brig of the King of France sailing on the ocean, and on it a sad-eyed sailor. Let us sing to him. We will sing to him of the moon. For this is the song of the moon, so beautiful, that it comes so quick and is gone so soon. This is the song of the moon, O sailor. If you like what you see, come join us in the flowing sea." And round the Froth and all the sirens went swimming round the boat, and the sad-eyed sailor looked at them. And as they looked, they saw he was weeping. And as they looked, he jumped into the water and fell like a stone. And one of the sirens went up, "Great, we'll have him for coral." Another one said, "I want his head, it's handsome." And the third said, "His guts smell of fish, let me feed him to the sharks." But Froth said, "No. This man is mine amongst all others. He is my husband, and I love him." For just at that moment, Froth remembered her old life. She remembered her happiness with her husband in the days when they had been happy. She remembered their laughter, and she missed him. And the siren said, "No, he is ours. Sister, you cannot take him, lest you break our circle." And she said, "He is mine by right. He was mine before he loved the sea. He is mine, I tell you." And the sirens heard that and knew they could not dissuade her. So they agreed to take the matter before the kings of the sea. For now, they said, they would lock him in a great cavern and leave him there while they sent out the summons. And Froth agreed. She waited until noon, when this tyrant's power is weak and they are blind and go to sleep. And then she rescued her husband. Breathing into his mouth that he might breathe water, she took him up to the ocean, put him on a boat. And there he sat there gasping, saying, "Where is she? Where is my wife?" But all the sailors laughed at him and took him home. Well, from that day, the great fisherman never went out again. He could not rest. He sat there staring into the fire. All through a golden spring he stared, until Beltane came round. Now all the men in Sardinia and in Sicily know that on Beltane the fairy folk visit the troubled, and the Queen of the Fae comes to the most trouble, an old woman she. And so it was, at midnight, he heard a little rat-a-tat-tat upon his door. And he went out, and there was the oldest, smallest, most gnarled woman he had ever seen, and she said, "If you want to see your wife again, I know how. She must pick for us the holy flower the siren stole from the fairies. Give it to me, and you will stand together. If but for a moment would you have this?" And he replied, "I would stand for her for any time. But how will I summon her?" And the little figure said, "Go out 7 leagues and blow the shell loud." And the next day, the sailor went out 7 leagues and blew the shell, and no sound came out to him, it seemed to him. But he heard a voice behind him, and there was his wife swimming in the sea, and she said, "No, go back, our destinies are separate. We cannot go together." And he said, "No, I know how you can be free. You must pick the flower that grows in the palace of the sirens. Do you know it?" And she said, "Oh yes, I know it. All the power of the sirens, their life depends on it. I will not pick it, for it will kill them, and they are my sisters." And her husband said, "Do you not want to come back to me?" And his wife said, "Well, how can I pick it? They guard it." And the man said, "I will ask the Queen of the Fae. I'm sure she can tell us." And he went back to land. And he waited, staring at the fire, until the Queen stepped out of the fire itself and said, "Take all the gems she was given by the king. Take the gold she was given. Take the gold the minister gave you. Sail out 7 leagues on 7, off Corsica's rocky shores. Blow the shell that is silent 7 times. And then when the wind blows, let loose one by one your shining gems. Be assured the sirens will follow you. And when they follow and leave their palace quite empty, your wife will do the rest." And so off he went into the broad ocean. He sailed 7 upon 7 leagues until he stood by Corsica's rocky shores. He blew the shell 7 times. He started to put out the great diamonds, taking first the shiny diamond that had first caught his wife's eye, putting it into the ocean. And then, as he put the first one in, a breeze started blowing him south quickly. And there he heard a voice, the voice of the sirens, singing across the sea. "We sing the song of the noontide sun. These gems sparkle, they quite stun. Oh, sailor, sailor, tarry here, share with us your gems so shiny." And he put out one by one, he put out the gems, he put out the gold while the wind blew brighter, harder, faster. It blew until it became a storm wind. And then all of a sudden, across the storm wind, there came the bellow of fury. And it seemed like the sea surged as if he was caught in a whirlpool that was dragging him back and dragging him down, dragging him down, dragging him back, dragging him down, until he stood with neck into the very court, the great palace, dragged down to the ocean floor, to the palace of the sirens. And there was his wife, and in her hand she held the great flower, shining bright. And just at that moment, the Queen of the Fae came riding on a dolphin. She took the flower and rode off. No man knows. Well, what happened next? Nobody truly knows. Some said the sirens were dead, and their voices became but the sighing of the wind, and that the man and the wife ruled together in their palace. Others said that they were together but for a moment, and the surging surf pulled them apart, and the Queen of the Fae kept her word but twisted it, and they were drowned. And others, perhaps the wisest, that she turned them into the jewelled girl, that even to this day, rare and beautiful, nests upon the shores of Corsica.